to my adult coloring channel. This video is going to be a tutorial on how to use watercolor pencils for beginners and the techniques used to create watercolor effects with pencils. First, if you like these type of tutorials, give it a thumbs up so that I know what type of videos to bring you guys in the near future. If you want to see more adult coloring videos like this one, please subscribe to my channel. Subscribing really helps in supporting my channel. Also, don't forget to hit the notification bell so that you will be notified when I upload more adult coloring videos like this. In the description box of this video is where you can find a link to my Facebook group if you would like to join us over there, where we do color alongs, live coloring chats, and coloring giveaways. In the description box, you can also find a link to my Instagram, TikTok, and Twitter if you want to follow me on one of those. Now let's have some fun and get into this tutorial. So I've been asked to make a video on how to use watercolor pencils and to show the differences in regular pencils versus watercolor pencils. So I decided to make a little worksheet to go over the techniques used with watercolor pencils and to show beginners how to use them properly. In a part 2 video, I will then show you guys how to take these techniques to a coloring book. In this tutorial, I'm going to be using my Staedtler Aquarel water pencils. These come in a 60 set for $76.48 on Amazon. So let me show you how these look. I have them in this little case. They look like this, and they basically come like this with a little watermark on them. And like I said, these came in a 60 set and they were $76.48 on Amazon. These are my first set of watercolor pencils, and they get considered on the cheaper side of pencils, but they get great pigmentation, and I would recommend them to any beginner just starting out. So this is a picture that I've done with those same pencils, and this is that you can tell the great pigmentation that you do get with these pencils, even though they're on a cheaper side. And this is one of my older pictures. I didn't have one of my newer pictures to get out, but this is an older picture that I've done in watercolor with those Staedtler Aquarel pencils. So you can do watercolor. People are always asking me, can you do watercolor in coloring books? You can do watercolor in coloring books. This is from Ivy and the Inky Butterfly. But this book and Johanna's books have good paper to be able to do that. You just can't use a lot of water in it, but you can get away with minimum water and get great effects with her books and those pencils. So I'm going to go over the techniques that you need to learn in order to use watercolor pencils and the supplies you will need to accomplish this. So you're going to need, of course, you're going to need water because they're watercolor pencils, and I have me some water here. And you're going to need some paper towel to blot your brush on, because you don't want that brush really wet. You want to be able to have something by you to blot your brush on as you go. You're also going to need some water brushes, and any kind of watercolor brushes will do. I like the ones with the fat ends. I also like the skinnier ones, but any kind of watercolor brush will do. And this is my favorite one right here because I just like that it's more flexible. So long as it says watercolor brush, you should be okay. I don't use watercolor brushes, but it's up to you if you want to use watercolor brushes. I suggest that if you're going to do watercolor pencils, to get a watercolor brush pen. And this brush pen is from Curetech, and you can get a 3-pack of Curetech Fused water brushes that look like this for $17.99. I have a 4-pack, one with the wider end, and I'll show you all 4 of mine. So I have the other 3 inside of this case here, but as you can see, some of them are like, one of them are flat where you can get around edges. So if you want to get around edges, you can get around edges. And then the other ones are in different sizes. Like this one is a smaller size. And then I have these 2. This one is a more bigger size than the one that I just showed you. It's much bigger. And I think this is the really tiny one. So this is the smallest size. See how really small that is, so you can get those fine details. And like I said, these pencils came with 60, and you get 60 colors. This is how the colors look. So it's not a big selection, but I like these pencils, and for a beginner, these are perfect. I just bought a new set of watercolor pencils from Cardenci that I just bought, and I will be doing a review on those later. But right now we're going to use these Staedtler watercolor pencils. So not only are you going to need your brushes, you also may need a palette holder, something to hold color in. If you use watercolors, usually you need a palette. The reason why, I'll show you the reason why you might need this later. So I'll just put that to the side. I want to talk a little more about the brushes. The way the brush works, before we get started, the way the brush works is that you open the brush here. You open it here. It untwists and it goes the opposite way that you usually twist. So you open here, and then there's a little hole there on the top. As you see, there's a little hole on the top. So you just dip this in water, or you can run it under the faucet. But there's a squeeze part right here where it says push. It says push right there. And right here is where you squeeze and suck up the water while it's running under the water. Or I could put it inside of my water thing and suck it up that way. There. So now I have more water in here. You don't need much because you're not going to use a whole, so the water's about right here. So you don't need much in your brush. You just need to make sure that you have some water in there. And then you just twist that back on there like this. And so that's how that works. And so when you're using your brush, when you want more water, what you will do is you will, let me take my paper towel. You're going to squeeze here as you go and get more water out. And then you see how that's wet. So your brush is always kind of wet, so you don't really need much to squeeze here. You only need to squeeze here when it's dry. Like right now you can see that it's wet on my finger. So you only need to squeeze it when it's dry. You don't need to constantly squeeze it. But the thing about having a water brush is when I'm on the go, and I like I have a lot of doctor's appointments, so when I go to the doctors and I'm there for a long time, I like to have something to do. I either take my pencils and my book with me, and if I want to do watercolor, I can. I don't have to have a cup of water by me. All I need is a brush with water already in it, and these are perfect for on the go. And it eliminates having the cup of water with you all the time. And it's much more easier to control the water in here than it is to control the water on your paintbrush if it was a regular brush. It's much harder to control how much water is on here. See all that water? I don't want that much water. So you want to make sure you don't put that much water on if you put too much water, your paper will wrinkle and it will warp your paper. So you don't want a lot of water, because coloring books are not made for watercolor. They're actually made for pencils or markers or fine liners or something like that. But they're not actually made for watercolor. So to get away with it, you only want to use as little water as you can. So let's go over the steps and how to actually use your watercolor pencils. Now let's talk about the watercolor pencil itself and how do you sharpen these. So if you notice on my watercolor pencils, they're not sharpened. And I really don't keep them sharpened unless I'm trying to do some fine detail and I'm actually writing in or coloring in some fine detail. Most of my watercolor pencils I let get like this, and I'll share with you in a minute why and how I let it get like this. But you can sharpen your watercolor pencils with any sharpener. It should be fine. I have here a Faber-Castell sharpener, and I can sharpen it in here with the handheld one, and I'll just sharpen it just so you guys can see. And there you go, it has a point to it. If you sharpen your watercolor pencil and it breaks, save that lead that breaks, because you can use that lead and you can use pieces of your sheddings of your pencil. So I can take the shedding of the pencil out of here and put it on my palette and use it and dissolve it and paint with it. But you also can use your Dale 133, and I have my Dale 133 here, which this is my favorite pencil sharpener. For you guys who don't know about this pencil sharpener, I have a video on about just this pencil sharpener. It's the best out, and I love it for my colored pencils. I use it for my watercolor pencils too whenever I need to sharpen it. And I will link that video of the 133 Dale in this video for you guys who haven't seen it, that can go back and look at it. But you just open it like this and you put the pencil inside of it, push the button, and I'm just going to sharpen it like I would sharpen a regular pencil. And I'm not going to sharpen that much because I don't want to lose much of my color, my watercolor. I want to save as much lead as I can. So I'm not sharpening it much. I only did it like a couple of times around. But if I wanted to do something with detail, I would sharpen it to a point. And the Dale 133 sharpens everything to a point. As you can see, I only went around like 3 times and look at that point. That's why I love my Dale 133. So now I want to go over the techniques that you would use for colored pencil, for your watercolor pencils. And I made a little worksheet, as I always do when I am doing a tutorial. And I will get that worksheet out now. But it says techniques for watercolor pencils. I have my paper towel here because this is what I'm going to blot. And I'm going to just fold this again just so it's a little thicker so I can blot my water brush on it. And so we're just going to go over the techniques for your watercolor pencils now. So the first technique for your watercolor pencils, and always make sure you always have your blot paper right next to where you're going to be, so you can go from there without leaking any water anywhere else. So I'm going to use this green one that I sharpened, and these does not have names on them. They only have numbers, as you can see right there. The number is 125-5. That's the color I'll be using. The first technique that you will learn is dry on dry technique. The dry on dry technique. And it's basically just taking your watercolor pencil and putting it on dry paper. So you're basically just going to color in as you would do normally with a colored pencil. And you can just color in with a normal colored pencil and do the same blending technique that you would do with a regular colored pencil. I'm going to zoom in just a little bit so you guys can see. And so I'm just shading this box in. And if I want to blend it, I can go lighter. But I'm not going to do that. I'm just doing a regular shade in. And this is called the dry on dry technique. And the reason why it's called that is because your pencil is dry and the paper that you're writing on is dry. And so if I wanted to color in my coloring book, I can just basically color like regular pencil on anything. The pencil works just like a regular pencil. So you can treat it just like a regular pencil. You can use the same pressure techniques and the same blending techniques that you would use with a regular pencil. And for those who don't know what the blending techniques are for a regular pencil, I also have a blending video that is very helpful for beginners, and I will link that video here. And if you want to go back later and look at that video, you can. But it has all the blending techniques in it for regular pencils. And you can do everything that you would do with a regular pencil with a watercolor pencil. You can add layers. You can shade. And now we have our regular watercolor color. The next technique that I'm going to show you is the add water technique. And you're going to see how vibrant this same pencil is going to become when you add water. So on this one, I am just going to shade it in just like I did on that side with the same color and the same way and the same layers. Now the only difference that you have between your regular colored pencil and your watercolor pencil is the binder that it's made out of. Your regular colored pencil is either made out of wax or oil binder. Your watercolor pencil is made out of a watercolor binder. So it is water soluble. Just means that to activate it, you just add water. And usually when you add water and you activate the color, it becomes much brighter. So I'm going to take my water brush, my CureTech water brush, and the first thing I'm going to do is put my top on the end so I don't lose it. But the first thing I'm going to do before I even go in, I'm going to check and see how wet this brush is. And it's a little wet. It's not too wet, so I can use it. I'm not going to even squeeze here. And I'm just going to go in and activate that water. And this is the add water technique. And you see how bright it automatically becomes. It's so bright. And it's really pretty. And that's how you want to, you know, if you got good watercolor pencils, by how much pigment you get from it and how bright and vibrant it is. And that's why I said these are great beginner watercolor pencils, because the vibrancy on them is awesome. So you see how my paper is bubbling just a little bit, and I didn't even use a lot of water. This is a mixed media paper that I'm using, and so I would say it's maybe the coloring book and Johanna Basford paper might be a little bit better because it wouldn't bubble from this little bit, but that's why you only want to use a little bit of water, and that's why I use my water brush, because I can control my water take on the paper, and I don't want to warp my paper. The next technique is dry on wet. So the dry on wet technique is basically you wet your paper first and you put your dry pencil down. So I'm going to wet this, and I'm actually going to go ahead and squeeze out some water just so you can see that I'm wetting it. I put a little too much water, but that's why you don't squeeze very often. And I'm just going to blot that away. So now my paper is wet, and you want it to be a little wet for this technique. And then you take your pencil, and I'm going to take a different color pencil. I'm going to take a blue one, and I'm just going to write on the wet. And this you would use for if you want it really vibrant. See how vibrant it is when I just rub that pencil on there while it's wet? It's very, very vibrant. And that is the dry on wet technique. Your paper is wet first, and then you put your pencil on it. And this is when you want it to be very vibrant like this, really vibrant, you would do this technique. I rarely do this technique. I usually do this one, the add water technique. You have to hurry up and do it too before your before your paper dry. So you notice how it's getting a little lighter down here. My paper is drier down here. I don't have as much water down here. But it's also warping my paper a little bit because I put a lot of water. So when your paper starts to wrinkle and you don't want to ruin your paper, my paper is wrinkling, that means you've put too much water. And I have put a lot of water there. Now the next technique is wet on wet. And that is when you take and you're going to put your brush, you're going to put some water, and we're not going to put as much water as we did last time. Just going to put a little water. Then you're going to take your pencil, and you're going to put your pencil in your in your palette. Just write on your palette. You can write right there on your palette. It's not going to be dark. Then I'm going to take that blue. Let me make sure this is clean. I'm going to pick that blue up, which makes it wet on wet. And I'm going to put it in here. And this gives it a more of a watercolor effect. So this is the more of a watercolor effect when you do wet on wet. So this is more like a painting, like how you would do a painting. And when you do this effect, I'm going to put more in there. People like to do this as like for their background work on their coloring pages. They like to do a wash on their coloring pages, and this would be like a wash technique. So it's much lighter than that. It's mostly just a wash of a color. The next technique that I'm going to show you guys, and I'm going to get a different color pencil just so you guys can see a different color pencil. I'm going to get purple this time. And I'm going to sit my palette off to the side so that's not in the way. The next technique is the tip of the pencil. So this would be using the tip of your pencil to get the watercolor effect. And as usual, as always, I have my pad here where I want to get the color off. And because I have water in the brush already, I don't have to swoosh this around in water. I could do that, but I already have water in here. So how I clean off my brush is by just squeezing down some water to the tip and clean off my brush. And make sure that blue is off of my brush. So now this is my purple pencil. And basically what you do is you take your brush to the tip of your pencil and you pick up some color. And once you pick up some color, you go ahead and put it on. And this, you can get a very vibrant effect also, because you have a lot of pigment on the tip of that brush. And I do use this one a lot. I like to use this one a lot because you just get a different effect when you do this one than when you do that one. See how dark that is? And you use less water when you do this. So you're not warping your page, but it takes a minute because you have to pick up the color off of the brush. And see how much color I picked up that time? I picked up a lot of color. And when I paint on with my paintbrush, I just basically goes back and forth, back and forth. And that's how you would do the tip of the pencil technique. Is by taking the tip of your pencil and picking up that color. And I can add a little more water because my brush is a little dry. So I want more water than that. You don't want to do it too hard because you don't want to break your lead. Your lead of your pencil is much softer on a watercolor than it is your regular color. So you want to be gentle with your lead of your pencil. And it dries much faster when you do it this way. The next way I'm going to show you guys how to do blending with your colored pencil. And I'm going to show you how to do a gradient. So let me clean off my brush first and get all the purple off my brush. So once my brush starts coming out clear, I know that there's no more purple on there. I'm just going to dip it in some water. So you can also dip this brush in your water if you want to make sure it's clean. So now it's clean and it's clear. It's coming off clear. So what I'm going to do is take this same purple pencil, and I want to make sure it's dry before I do anything. And it's dry. And I'm going to show you how to do a gradient. You would do, when you are coloring in your coloring book or on something, the best way to do a gradient is just color half. So you're going to take the dry on dry way technique. You're going to color that area with your watercolor pencil. And I want this end to be darker than this end. I want this end to be dark, and then I want it to go lighter. That's a gradient. In order to do that, I'll color half of this picture with my dry on dry technique. And I'm going to stop about right there. So you have to judge how far to go. And I'm just going to stop halfway. And I'm going to take my water brush. And I'm going to make sure my water brush is wet. So the way I check it is by putting it on the tip of my finger. And I see that it's dry. There's nothing coming out. So I'm going to squeeze it. And I might have to squeeze it again. I'm getting a little bit of water, but not as much as I want yet. Okay, wait a minute. Usually you can see the water come down here. There we go. So now I have more water. Now I can see it. So I'm basically going to take this and I'm just going to go in a circular motion. I'm going to take it all the way across. And then I'm going to drag this color down here. And I'm just going to drag that color down there. And you're just basically dragging the color down there. And that way I made a gradient. So you see how it got darker to lighter. That's how you would do your gradient with your watercolor pencil. Now, it's totally different when you're doing colored pencil. When you're doing colored pencil, you just shade it in down there. But with watercolor, you don't have to color the whole thing. You just drag that color down there until it's lighter. Now, if I wanted to blend my colors together, let's say we're going to blend purple and pink. Let me find a pink color. And here's a pink. So now I have a pink color. And so I'm going to take my purple color. And I want to do purple and pink. And I want to blend them together. So I'm going to add my purple on one end. And I'm adding the purple to the one end, and I'm just shading it in. No perfect way to do it. And you see how less vibrant that color is than when you look at it over there. Now I'm going to take my pink color, and I'm just going to start down here and shade it in. And I'm doing the same thing I did with the purple. So if you were doing a flower or something And like I said, in part 2, I'm going to show you guys how to use it in a coloring book, because it's totally different than using your regular pencils in a coloring book. And I'm going to stop right there. And now I'm going to take my water brush, and I'm have my paper right next to me, and I'm making sure it's clean, and it's clean. And I got water. I think I got water. Yep, I got water. So I'm just going to go up and down with this. And how I usually do it is go one end and then the other end. And now I'm going to start on this end. And I'm just blending them together when I get to the middle. And that's the way you would blend your colors together. Now, layering your colors is totally different if you wanted to layer your colors on a coloring book. So I'm going to clean that brush off again, and I'm going to make sure I got water. Now, you can also layer your colors. You don't have to. I'll show you what I mean by, so you see how this is purple and this is pink? I can mix these two together by, see how I mix them in the middle together? By putting them together. Now over here, I'm just going to layer my colors, which means I'm going to put one on top of the other. So I'm going to lay my purple first. And I'm just going to lay that purple on the whole box. And then I'm going to go ahead and activate the purple. So when you lay down your color, it doesn't matter how messy it looks really, because you're going to activate it with water. So see how messy that looks? It doesn't matter that it looks that messy. So now I'm going to add my water, and I'm just checking my finger for water. And I'm activating the purple. And I'm just activating that purple down there. And once this dries, you can layer your next color. But this has to completely dry. So we're going to let that dry, and we're going to go back to it after we do this one. Now, you can also mix your colors together. And this is where the two differs. Where this, you can mix it on paper together, or you can layer it. And what I mean by mixing is I can lay my purple first on paper. And I'm just doing the same thing I did over there with the layering. And then I'm going to lay my pink on top of it. And this is how you mix the colors together if you were mixing them on the paper. So there is going to be a mixture of color. There's not going to be one laid on top of the other. It's going to be a mixture because I laid both of those colors down dry. And I have not activated those colors yet. So when you lay your colors down dry, if you lay more than one color down, you'll be mixing the colors together. I can lay a third color down and mix the third color together too, but I'm only going to do two right now. So I'm going to take my brush and show you guys how you mix it on paper, and my brush is wet. And I'm just going to, and I'm kind of going to go like in scrambling circles so it can mix the colors together. And when I'm doing that, it's mixing both of those colors together. Now it's not purple anymore. It's like a purplish pink. So you can make a new color by mixing it on paper. So see how it's like a magenta now? Now it's a magenta color. It's not purple or pink. That's how you mix colors on paper. Now, let's go back to the other one and see if it's dry. So if I didn't want to mix the two colors together, what I needed to do was lay one down and let the other one dry. And it's almost dry, but not quite yet. So I'm going to wait a minute. So let's go to mixing on a palette. Instead of mixing the two colors together right here, we can mix them on our palette first and then bring it to our paper. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to take my purple and I'm going to take the tip of it and I'm just going to grab some of that, and I actually want more water than that. There we go. So I'm going to grab this color and I'm going to put it in my on my palette. And it kind of takes a little bit of time to get that color on there. Just because I don't have much water there. There we go. Now I got it. And then I'm going to take my pink one and I'm going to dry off my water brush. And this is why you want your water brush by you. And I'm going to make sure that purple is gone out of it. Now I'm going to take my pink one and now I'm going to try to grab some of that pink. And I'm just going to put that pink in here too. Oops, I didn't mean to touch it. So now I got to do it over. So try not to touch the purple. Just try to put it in the same thing. There. Now I got pink in there and I'm going to add some water to my pink. And I'm going to mix those two colors together. And I actually got this a little too watery. So I'm going to add some more pink. So you can add as much pink as you want, as much purple as you want, and get it to whatever color you want it to be. Now I wanted more pink, so I added more pink. And so now I can take that color that I made in my palette and put it in this box. And I made like a wash almost. But you can make it darker if you want to make it darker. But some people like to make their wash also their background. Now, if I keep going with this, I'm going to warp my paper. So I'm not going to keep going with it because it'll be too much water. Now let's go back to our last one that we were doing a layering. So I think layering is dry now. And so because we chose purple, I'm hoping that pink will go on there okay. So I'm going to take pink and I'm just going to put it on the top. And you notice how it's much darker. I think that's because my pencil is still a little wet. But you're going to go on top of that purple. And because that purple is dry, it's not going to mix that purple and pink together. It's actually just going to layer that pink on top. It's not going to mix the two colors. So you're not going to come out with a magenta color. You're going to come out with a pink on top of purple. So I can keep layering if I wanted to and layer another color on there and have a really pretty effect. And you can make a really pretty effect by just layering. I like the layering technique more than I like the mixing on paper. And so that pink is on top of that purple. It's not mixing the two together. And that's because we let that purple dry first. So I can let this pink dry and I can add another color if I wanted to, depending on what I want it to look like. But the layering effect is used a lot, and I use it a lot in the watercoloring books, in my coloring books. So the last technique that I want to show you guys is the splatter technique. And I didn't write that down here, the splatter effect. And I'm going to write that right here. And it's called splatter effect. So the last technique is you take your pencil and you take your water brush and you clean your water brush off. You make sure that water brush is wet. See if I need more water. You don't want too much water when you do this. So I just want a little bit of water. Okay, I think I got enough. Now I'm just going to splatter, like kind of, I need more water. There we go. Kind of like splatter this pink area onto paper. And you see how I'm getting those splatters? I don't know if you can see that in the camera. Let me zoom in a little. So I'm getting these like splatters on paper. And I'm going to do it with the purple so you can see it much better. So let's do the purple one. So you just basically flick it and you see that purple. I hope you guys can see that and how it's just splattering. So that is the splatter effect with the pencil. It takes a minute to get it. Now can you see that? See the splatter? So that is another effect you can do with your colored pencil. And people like to do this in a lot of their watercolor art. The splatter effect. And you just need a little bit of water, not a lot. I think it works better with a regular brush than it does your water brush, but it works too with your water brush. So let me zoom out. And let's go over all the techniques. So these were all the techniques. The one thing I want to tell you guys what not to do also. There's a couple of things you should not do with your watercolor pencils. So we did the dry on dry, which was dry paper and dry pencil. We did the dry pencil, then we added water. These two are the main techniques. We did dry on wet. We wet the paper first and then we put the pencil on it. We did wet on wet, where the paper was wet and the pencil was a little wet. We did the tip of the pencil, where we took it straight from the tip of the pencil and put it into the box. We made a gradient with just one color by putting half of the color in half of the box and pulling the color down. We blended colors together by blending it right in the middle, by just bringing it to the middle and blending it. We layered by putting one color down, letting it dry, and putting another color on top and layering colors. We mixed it together on paper, where we mixed two colors together on paper. We put purple and pink and made a magenta color, and we did that on paper. Then we mixed on a palette and made like a whitewash. So if you wanted a background for a whitewash, that would be your mixing on a palette. And then we did our splatter effect, where you just take the pencil and the brush and flick it and you have a splatter effect. There's two things that I want to tell you never, 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 never do with your watercolor pencil. The first thing I want to tell you what not to do is do not put your watercolor pencil in a cup of water or dip your pencil in water and then go to the paper. You don't want to do that. And the reason you don't want to do that is you do not want to ruin the wood on your pencil. So if you was to dip your pencil in water, you can rot out the wood in your pencils, and then your pencil would break off whenever you sharpen your pencil. And that is just not a great effect to do at all. So that's the number one thing you don't want to do with your colored pencil. And like I said in the beginning, the other effect that you can do with your pencil is you can sharpen your pencil, and you can use those sharpened pieces and save those sharpened pieces as some color and dissolve the color on a palette and put it on your paper. So anytime you sharpen your watercolor pencils, you can save your shavings and watercolor with that. So the next video, I will show you guys how exactly I color in my coloring books, which techniques I use, and how I get that watercolor effect in a coloring book. I want to say thanks for joining me. Don't forget to subscribe, hit the notification bell, and have a colorful day. Bye.